Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com. Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Ray Flowers breaks it all down for you from a fantasy sports perspective. Hey there, everyone. Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. A big day today here on Fantasy Sports Daily. I'm holding it up right now. I voted. You should vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. It's not a political show. It's very important that everyone votes. Get out there, get your vote placed, get your vote counted. Vote today in the big elections. And happy birthday to one of my homies, Josh. I'm Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. Thanks for joining us here today on the show. Every day, Monday through Friday, we're here on Fantasy Sports Daily, 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time, rocking and rolling, talking politics. No, we're talking fantasy football with you. We're talking fantasy basketball with you. We'll talk fantasy baseball with you when we're in season there too. We've talked college football on the show. We talk whatever's going on in the world of sports today. It's a lot of football. I am Ray Flowers. I'm with you Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. On Wednesdays, Justin Fensterman is in. He's the one that talks basketball with you all. So this show is Monday through Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 3 to 6 Eastern. Jeff Mans has the Elite Sports Show, and I'm on with Jeff there on Wednesdays. So I'm not here Wednesdays, but I'm on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio on Wednesdays with Jeff from 3 to 6. He's there 5 days a week. Ted Schuster also joins a couple of times throughout the week. So those are the two ways you can kind of get the audio version of me. You can find me on social media at The Ray Flowers. And you can find me here. You can find us on YouTube.com/@Elite Plus Network if you want to watch live or leave comments and questions that we address throughout the show. You can watch us live on Facebook at facebook.com/FantasyGuruHQ. You can watch us, you can leave questions and comments there as well. On Twitter X, you can follow us at Fantasy Guru Site Live. You can type in Fantasy Sports Daily to your local podcast network, and wherever that might be, you should be able to find the show, click subscribe, all that kind of stuff. You can get the show right to your phone or computer every day. And you can also go to FantasyGuru.com, just click that Elite Plus page at the top, or Elite Plus tab at the top of the page. And you're off and running with us at FantasyGuru.com for free. You can always click the subscribe tab in the top right corner. Let's not overlook that fact. Subscribe to FantasyGuru.com. You can still use that promo code BOO. I think it's giving a discount on DFS football and wagering football right now. I don't know if they've taken it down. It's supposed to be down. Sometimes the tech team doesn't pull it down. Use the promo code BOO, BOO, and see if it gets you a little bit of a discount on either the DFS football or the DFS or the wagering football. As you can see behind me, the all-in VIP package is there. It's BOGO. Buy one, get one free. Buy hockey, get basketball. Buy basketball, get hockey. It's the same package. Subscribe. Top right corner of the site, fantasyguru.com. Click on it. And you can also send a note to support@fantasyguru.com. Support@fantasyguru.com. I see our numbers are really down today, which I'm assuming is good news because people are out and voting. Is that why? Hopefully folks are out and voting. I hope that's a good idea. We'll see. What we're talking about today on the show is we're talking football. We got a big day. So there's voting nationwide here in the United States, right? Presidential election, all of that. We've got the NFL trade deadline. We've already had trades come down this morning. So we'll talk about those scenarios as well. As you can see there on the screen, names like Jonathan Mingo, Khalil Herbert, Za'Darius Smith. The Raiders just hired Norv Turner as their offensive assistant. Turner gets to work with his son, Scott Turner, who's going to be the new OC. Yeah, okay. Who's really running that show? Well, whatever. But we've got trades. We've got guys like Thielen who could still get traded. We got an injury to Dak Prescott to talk about. We have potential returns of Keaton Mitchell, Jameson Williams, A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, Drake London. But before we get to any of that, we'll talk about what happened last night on Monday Night Football. In about 25 minutes, we'll visit, as we do every Tuesday, with Armando Marsal. We'll talk waiver wire with him. Justin Herbert, one of the guys we're going to talk about, he was traded. What's his outlook looking like here? What about the scenario with Quentin Johnston, who had the big touchdown, who wasn't covered? What about his quarterback, Justin Herbert, who's starting to trend in the right direction? Tajae Spears, Rico Dowdle, Jauan Jennings, Xavier Legette, NWI, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Taysom Hill, Mike Gesicki, some of the names we might talk about with Armando, so stay tuned for that moving forward. All right, let's start out with the football game last night. The Chiefs 30-24 emerged victorious over the Buccos. Patrick Mahomes did his thing. Patrick Mahomes went for 291 yards and 3 scores. He did hurt his ankle late, was able to play through it, helped the team win in overtime. We'll have to continue to monitor that because obviously while Mahomes isn't a running quarterback, quote unquote, he's obviously athletic and he does move the pocket and get first downs and extend drives with his legs. So I have to watch that. But he was on last night, 34 for 44. Didn't throw a pick for the first time this season. I think like half his picks this year have been tip passes. 3 touchdowns, no picks yesterday. Had a strong game, statistically speaking, and they won the football game. And while the Bucs fall to 4-5, the Chiefs moved to 8-0. And as we've talked about here on this show, we've all gotten really tied up in Patrick Mahomes is living up to fantasy expectations. The team is 8-0. The team is 8-0 with a street free agent running back. The team is 8-0 without their number 1 wide receiver. The team is 8-0 without their number 2 wide receiver. Like, they're, I mean, really, right? Doing a lot of things. But Patrick Mahomes is provided the ankle's okay, and everything that we've heard to this point in time suggests it is. Patrick Mahomes is somebody that, we've all had our battles with, I guess, this year. We've all made our decisions with this year. Some people are all in, some people aren't. Choose your poison, pick your poison. As we've said at fantasyguru.com, we're still in with Patrick Mahomes. So Patrick Mahomes did it last night, finally paying off. He's now 5 touchdown passes the last 2 games. Maybe this is the trend of him starting to at least be a top 10 quarterback the rest of the way. Kareem Hunt won the football game with that late score. And, Kareem Hunt is, and we've said this, all of us have said this, he's running in mud. All right, he just is. But he had 27 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown, and 101 plays, 27, 28 touches. He had a catch, 2 plays. He's averaging like 25 touches the last 4 games. In only 2 of the games has he run for like 80 yards. Like 2 of the games he had, it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But he's averaging like 25 touches the last 4 games. He's got 5 touchdowns in 4 games. And I was thinking back, hopefully you were there with me too. You remember when Carson Steele was a thing? Remember when people said, blow your budget on Carson Steele? I saw in a league, I think someone spent, was it 97 of the $100 on Carson Steele? People on SiriusXM, Carson Steele. People on the internet, and on social media, Carson Steele. People in articles, Carson Steele. On this show, before Kareem Hunt signed a contract with the Chiefs, the day he was visiting the team, before he actually signed, I said, Kareem Hunt, Sanjay P. Ryan, Carson Steele. Documented. Jeff Mans, a couple hours later on SiriusXM, said the same exact thing. Kareem Hunt's out there ripping off 25 carries a week, scoring a touchdown every game. Last night, P. Ryan got in the end zone as a ball catcher. Carson Steele, 3 carries for 9 yards. That's one of the biggest misses of the year is Carson Steele, because people were blowing 4/5 of their budget to add Carson Steele, 2/3 of their budget, 3/4, everywhere. Terrible advice from people that did that. At fantasyguru.com and here live on this show, Fantasy Sports Daily, we said Kareem Hunt. Now, Kareem Hunt still got a couple of weeks. Everyone, we talked about the Pacheco situation last week. We got a report from Jay Glazier over the weekend that they're hoping that he's back by the end of November. He's still, Pacheco, out for multiple weeks. I don't know what the level of excitement was last week with everyone having to add Pacheco in trades and all that. He's still at least 2 weeks away from the sound of it, maybe 3. So we'll get a couple extra weeks of Hunt. When Pacheco is back that first week, they probably share the backfield. And if Pacheco's healthy and looks good, right, he takes over the backfield. So Hunt's got a shelf life here. Not to mention the fact that the only reason he's really producing right now is because of the massive volume. But this is, again, what we were hoping for when we said add Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. Another strong game for Kareem Hunt. Travis Kelce. Look, Cade Otton, we talked about this on the show yesterday. Cade Otton, we'll talk about him in a few minutes, had another huge game. Okay, he did. Travis Kelce's got 28 targets the last 2 games. Last night, 14 catches for 100 yards. Travis Kelce's the guy you want on draft day. He's the guy you wanted 3 weeks ago. He's the guy you wanted 2 weeks ago. He's the guy I told you all you wanted last week. He's the guy we still want this week. Because remember, Otton's doing a lot of what he's doing because Godwin and Evans are out. Godwin's done, but when Evans returns, he'll soak up targets. He'll become a focal point. Evans will be someone that'll be utilized in the red zone heavily by Baker Mayfield. Travis Kelce's the guy you want. Travis Kelce's gone 7 catches for 70 yards, I think, in 4 or 5 games now. Huge game last night. Didn't get in the end zone, but 14 catches for 100 yards. A huge game for Travis Kelce. And Kelce, I think Otton is 3rd at the tight end position, and Kelce is 4th right now in terms of total points. For all the struggles Kelce has had, for the lack of touchdown production that Kelce has had, he's still going to be a top 3 tight end this year. Maybe top 2. Still going to happen. Another huge game for him last night. Now, going back to the receiving core with this team, the Chiefs, I don't want to bash Xavier Worthy because, everyone else is doing it. But if you didn't see it, there was a ball thrown. He was wide open, streaking down the left sideline. There was a ball thrown to him. Instead of turning his back to the quarterback and catching the football and going into the end zone, he backpedaled into the end zone, caught the ball in his chest, backpedaled into the end zone. The problem is, as he was backpedaling into the end zone, his foot went out of bounds. So he stepped out of bounds before he actually got to the end zone. It wasn't even a reception. Terrible. He lost where he was on the football field. Can't happen. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie. You got to know where you're on the football field. It was lazy. If he would have turned his shoulders, he could have caught the ball over his shoulder and gone into the end. He had 2 targets all game. He had 2 carries for minus 10 yards. So he actually got you a minus point last night. He has been a literal, there's touchdown or bust guys. It's him. He either gets in the end zone or he does nothing. 2 of the last 3 games, he hasn't even had 5.5 PPR points. He's done nothing. He's not even really part of the offense. They desperately need him to be part of the offense. Last night's not going to help. And Andy Reid was not happy with Xavier Worthy. We'll see what it means moving forward. We saw Mecole Hardman become a thing in the second half. Got 3 passes for 17 yards. So Worthy continues to just touchdown or bust. Now, DeAndre Hopkins was really interesting. Hopkins had his best game of the season, 8 catches for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was moved around the formation last night in a way that he hasn't previously. And I was reading Nathan Janke's work over at PFF. Really good work. All these snap counts I have in my article, my big weekly breakdown that comes out on Thursdays, my matchup report, are from PFF. And he was talking about the fact that Hopkins, has traditionally filled the X role in the offense. Mahomes doesn't throw to the X role. That's not the part of the offense that they really utilize heavily. Mahomes threw the ball 6 times to Hopkins when he was lined up out wide on the line of scrimmage. That's the most that I think he's had ever to one guy from the X. So Mahomes is changing. It'll be really interesting to see what happens when Juju Smith-Schuster returns. The expectation is fully that Juju goes into the slot. So Juju should be getting those 5 to 7 targets out of the slot. That is where Mahomes loves to throw the football. So don't bail on Juju Smith-Schuster. He and Hopkins can coexist in this offense. We're not going to see Worthy get big volume. We're not going to see Hardman get big volume. We're not going to see Justin Watson get big volume. There is space here for 5 to 7 targets for each of these guys, Hopkins and Juju Smith-Schuster. So just remember that they fill different roles in the offense. Okay, going to the other side of things, Baker Mayfield, 2 touchdown passes. I think that's a 6th straight game he's thrown 2 touchdown passes. It's the first time in 4 games he hasn't thrown at least 2 picks. So he was very clean last night. 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not a huge fantasy effort, but 202 you'll take. Didn't again throw the pick last night, which was big. Didn't have a fumble last night, so he didn't turn the ball over. Bottom line is, I think the Chiefs ran like 30 more plays than the Bucs last night. They just had the ball a lot more and just ran more plays. So a lot of the Buccaneers' production, despite scoring 24 points and going to overtime, just wasn't pronounced because Baker Mayfield threw the ball 31 times. They ran the ball less than 20 times. Like, they just didn't do much. 9, 7, 16, 19. They ran the ball 19 times. So it was one of those nights where there really wasn't much other than Kate Otton, who we already spoke of. Baker Mayfield's fine. He really needs to get Mike Evans back. The reports with Mike Evans and that hamstring suggest he's going to miss 1 more week and then hopefully return. We'll see if that's accurate or not. But they really need him back in this offense moving forward. So Baker was fine. In the backfield, it's one of these scenarios where Sean Tucker's involved, but he's really not involved. So we don't worry about Sean Tucker at this point. He's kind of just a guy. The last couple of games here, Bucky Irving is touching the ball more than Rachaad White. Unfortunately for Irving, White's the guy getting in the end zone. 3 touchdowns in 2 games for White is superseding the production of Irving, even though Irving's the one that's getting the ball more. So we have a scenario where Rachaad White is somehow outproducing Irving, even though he's on the field more with less touches. Like last night, he had 34 snaps to 19 for Bucky Irving. So a substantial difference there. But Irving had 10 touches and White had 6 or whatever it was, something like that. So neither one of these guys is a good start really at the moment because they're really eating into each other's work. White's getting the work near the goal line. White's the pass catching back. Irving's kind of the between the 20s guy, it seems like. And again, both guys just not very productive. And that, in games where they don't score 30 points and put up 400 yards of offense, Irving and White, the value in the fantasy space is going to come down to who gets in the end zone, because both guys are like 10-point-a-week guys. Do they get you a touchdown to get you the 16 points, or do they keep you at 10? So it's kind of not an exciting place to be. None of the players on the Bucs last night, by the way, in a difficult matchup against the Chiefs, even ran for 25 yards. So that just didn't happen. Tucker, White, Irving, we talked about them. Kate Otton, by the way, 8 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. That is 3 consecutive games with 8 catches on 10 targets for Kate Otton, who has been spectacular. And I said this when the injuries happened to Godwin and Evans. I said, look, Otton for me is a tight end. Won the rest of the way. He's the top 10 tight end. Did not anticipate vying for tight end 1 honors as he has the last 3 weeks, where he's been uber consistent and extremely productive. Don't expect that to continue at that level. I think when Evans comes back, we get back into that 550 zone kind of with Otton. But the bottom line is, if you have him, you have the tight end position taken care of. And that is something not a lot of people can say at this point in time. So just be happy. Whether he's tight end 7 the rest of the way or tight end 3 doesn't really matter. You've got a weekly starter you don't have to worry about. And about half your league is still worrying about who they're starting at tight end. By the way, Sterling Shepard was the lead receiver last night. 5 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards. A lot of it right at the end of the game. Dealing with the hamstring injury. I had a question last night. Who do I pick up? I need someone desperate because Jalen McMillan was ruled out late. I said go Trey Palmer. Ended up being the right call because he had 2 catches for 33 yards. Jarrett had 1 for 9. Shepard was already owned, so Palmer was the best pivot. I guess the best pivot would have been Ryan Miller, had a 1-yard touchdown, but come on. So this is just it was just one of those nights for the Bucs where not a lot went right. Okay, moving on from Monday Night Football. For those people that missed it, despite what we heard over the weekend and ending into yesterday's show when we talked about Dak Prescott probably being okay with the the hamstring injury, escalated really quickly yesterday. All of a sudden, it was like, well, he's not okay. He's going to miss some games. There's the potential that he's going to be placed on the injured list. And Jerry Jones came out and said straight up he's going on the injured list. So Prescott went from being okay to injured list in 24 hours. He's out for at least 4 weeks now. Cooper Rush takes over. Cooper Rush is okay, but he's not Dak Prescott. Despite Prescott's struggles, he's obviously a superior quarterback to Cooper Rush. We will see what happens. CeeDee Lamb's got a shoulder issue he's dealing with right now. The Cowboys season is spiraling around the drain. Messy. So the entire offense with the Cowboys has to be looked at in a negative manner from where it was, and it was already being looked at in a negative manner. We'll talk a little bit in a few minutes here about Rico Dowdle, who I think is the guy everyone wants to talk about. We'll talk to Armando and Marsal about him. The Cowboys did make a move today. Again, NFL trade deadline today. They acquired Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver of the Panthers, for a 7th-round pick next year. Oh, excuse me. Say this again. Mingo and a 7th-round pick next year go from the Panthers to the Cowboys, who sent a 4th-round draft pick next year to the Panthers. So the Panthers basically got a 4th-round pick for Jonathan Mingo, who was taken, by the way, if you remember, in the 2nd round. Has done nothing, obviously, with the Panthers going to the Cowboys. The Cowboys just trying to acquire talent, I guess, at this point. Weird. Very weird given everything, because, again, we just talked about the quarterback going on the IR and the team, whether 3-5. But they acquired Mingo. Mingo probably becomes the wide receiver 3 for this team, at least until if Brandon Cooks ever comes back. It's CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert. Turpin's a nice player, but he's little, and Brooks. And so Mingo's got a chance to become the 3rd wide receiver for this team. It's not something to get excited about. It's not something that says you have to go out and pick up Mingo on the waiver wire, because, again, their offense is going to change without Dak Prescott. But it's a new lease on life for Mingo, and maybe he can rediscover the talent that made him a 2nd-round pick. By the way, that now leaves Adam Thielen as the top dog in Carolina with Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. Now, do the Panthers trade Thielen? Thielen himself has said that, look, he's not sure if he's going to be able to play through his hamstring injury this week, which is a bit strange because it kind of seemed like he almost played last week. So is this Thielen saying, I don't want to injure myself in case I get traded? Is this him saying to teams that want to trade for him, hey, look, I'm beat up, meaning he doesn't really want to get traded? I I don't know. The bottom line is Thielen is one of the veteran wide receivers whose names has been bandied about as a trade option. The Panthers have already traded away Mingo. Last week, they traded away Johnston. Do they trade Thielen? Do they completely blow this thing up? Because they've about blown it up anyway. So we'll see with Thielen, but that's a very fascinating one to watch because Thielen, we know, is not prime Adam Thielen. He can still move chains. And if he's in a good offense, he can catch 5 passes for 60 yards a week. Something to think about here with him. If you want to run to the waiver wire and add a guy right now, because you have free open waiver wires, adding Adam Thielen and seeing if he gets traded, not the end of the world, even if he doesn't get traded. He's the number 1 wide receiver for this team. The Panthers, if he doesn't, he'd stay. The Bears made a trade. They sent out Khalil Herbert, who the metrics say is a pretty good running back, who the numbers say is a pretty good running back, who the eye test says is a pretty good running back. He got traded because the Bears decided they didn't want to use him. Okay. They went out and signed DeAndre Swift, which Swift has done a really good job this year. But as we said when the signing occurred, you had Herbert there. Why not just, was it worth it? Okay. They did it. Okay. It's working out with Swift, but didn't work out with Herbert. Johnston's become the backup there. So Herbert is traded to the Bengals. Now, this is interesting because Zach Moss kind of out of nowhere had a neck injury that precluded him from playing last week. Then we heard yesterday that there is concern that he's going to miss some time, some significant time. I forget what the wording was, but he's going to miss some time. This addition of Khalil Herbert kind of suggests that Zach Moss is circling to drain himself. Maybe his neck injury is serious and there's an IR stint coming, something like that. So Khalil Herbert, logically, becomes the running back 2 right now for the Bengals. Now, again, this is tough. Short week, trying to learn the playbook and stuff. Yeah. So even you can't, obviously, in no scenario should you be playing Khalil Herbert this week. But you can add Khalil Herbert because it seems likely that he takes over the number 2 spot with the Bengals, meaning he's one injury to Chase Brown away from getting 20 touches a week himself, like we saw Brown last week, who had 30 touches. So this becomes a scenario where Khalil Herbert, who no one cared about yesterday, who some people did add last week, thinking, well, maybe he gets traded. Not an ideal place to get traded to because they have a guy in Chase Brown. But it's very reasonable to think Khalil Herbert gets in the mix here and gets some work. So he's someone to talk about adding. And there's a scenario where he's helping you in the fantasy playoffs if Chase Brown gets hurt and Zach Moss is indeed injured for the long term, potentially done for the season. The Lions made a move. They obviously lost Aiden Hutchinson to the broken leg. There's some hope that Hutchinson can return later in the playoffs. We'll see if that's the case. But they needed pass rush, so they made a move. They picked up Browns edge rusher Za'Darius Smith. Cost them a 5th-round pick next year and a 6th-round pick in 2026. Detroit also gets a 7th-round pick back. It's really weird how all these trades, right? It's like I guess it's not weird. It's what everyone does in Dynasty too. You trade out to get in, trade out to get in. The Lions acquired Za'Darius Smith. He's the 28th best pass rusher at the edge position according to PFF. Not the best, not the greatest, but it's a need that the Lions had, and they addressed it. Good for the Lions who are going for it, obviously, this season. Let's talk about some of the players that could return this week before we visit with Armando Marsal. And we'll continue to monitor things here on the trade market. I've not seen any other trades here in the last half hour since the show began. Keaton Mitchell, who obviously hurt his knee and had surgery and all of that, he's got a chance to play this week. And this is interesting for the Ravens because everyone's assuming Justice Hill is the backup to Derrick Henry. And legitimately, he has been. Of course, Hill is nothing like the player of Henry. So this is one of those scenarios. Henry gets hurt hypothetically. If Justice Hill took over, he's not getting 22 carries anyway. So, Keaton Mitchell is even less of Derrick Henry than Justice Hill. He's even smaller. But we saw last year he averaged, 8 yards a carry? There were some dynamic bursts last season. Some touchdowns, some big plays. Then he got hurt. He's kind of a scat back because of his size. But the Ravens are getting healthy and making moves. And you ain't be wanting to face this team. They added Deontay Johnson, right? They now are talking about getting Keaton Mitchell back. These are 2 explosive players to an offense that already is steamrolling opponents. So Mitchell doesn't do anything to Derrick Henry because Mitchell would be a 3rd down back anyway. He's not taking any carries away from Henry. He would make it difficult for Justice Hill to be someone you could even dart throw, start. In fact, there would be it'll be interesting to see how we'll have an update on the running back grid at fantasyguru.com. I'm going to assume we're still going to say that Justice Hill is the backup because I think that Hill is more inclined to take 1st and 2nd down work than Mitchell if something were to happen to Henry. But there would be a really split backfield with Hill and Mitchell if something were to happen to Henry. So it's more of just an FYI for those of you playing the long game. No one's talking about Keaton Mitchell, right? I don't see any articles talking about him. I searched a bunch of waiver wire articles this morning. I didn't see a single one of them that had Keaton Mitchell's name in it. Has to be in a deep league, but if you're in a deep league, Keaton Mitchell's not a bad target. Jameson Williams is set to return from his suspension this week. The Lions, Mr. Goff, Jared Goff, is in a zone that few others have ever been in. I think his completion percentage over the last 6 games is almost 83%. I don't think that's ever been done in the history of football. Unfortunately, he's thrown for like 215 yards the last 2 games or whatever the hell it is. They're controlling the game flow. They're using their backs, both Montgomery and Gibbs, and they're just scoring short touchdowns, right? So we get Williams back. People get excited. He had some big games early on. The volume in this offense is not there. It's 25 passes a week. The consistency for Williams in terms of his target rate all over the place. He's not a consistent because he's opened up his route tree, but he's still more of a deep threat than not. So James Williams is back to help the Lions. Great news for the Lions. Is Williams startable as a wide receiver 3? When he catches that 50-yard touchdown, sure. But is he going to be getting 7 or 8 targets? They're just not throwing the ball enough right now for that to be a case, even if they want to do that. So be cautious with starting Jameson Williams this week. A.J. Brown, who's got the knee issue, had an MRI. Good news is day-to-day. So no significant issue for A.J. Brown with the knee. He's got a chance to play this week against the Cowboys. We'll obviously follow this situation very closely because his presence in the lineup is a huge boost to the entire Eagles team, not just the fact that he's caught 5 balls for 84 yards in 4 of his 5 games that he's played this year. Amari Cooper, another legitimate must start each week. Amari Cooper is being called day-to-day with his wrist injury. Very surprising he didn't play last week. The Bills obviously, I'm guessing, so it's not obvious, but I'm guessing, are playing the long game here. They're not worried about winning games in weeks 9 and 10. They're worried about getting to the playoffs and doing damage in the playoffs. So they probably just gave a breather week to Cooper to get this wrist issue, a little bit of time, get him some therapy, get him through it so it's not something that lingers to the point where now it's an issue in week 15. He's being called day-to-day as well, just like A.J. Brown. That's better than last week's, So hopefully he'll practice at some point this week. We'll get an update there. Hopefully we'll get firm confirmation by Friday from the Bills that he's going to play this week. He's in. That's, I think, my and everyone else's expectation at this point. So at this point in time, expect Amari Cooper to return this week for the Bills. And then finally, Drake London, who is part of the injured wide receivers across the land. We talked about my teams yesterday and all the injuries I'm dealing with the wide receiver spot. Drake London has got the oblique issue and the hip pointer. His head coach called him day-to-day. So the same scenario as the other 2 guys, Cooper and Brown. It sounds like there's a very realistic chance that London plays the next game for the Falcons. Of course, we have to follow the news here. We were just talking about, Dak Prescott was supposed to be okay, and now he's on the IR. These things can change quickly, but right now as we record this show, Drake London day-to-day with a legitimate chance to play against the Saints in Week 10, and the Saints are crumbling. So that would be an excellent time for Drake London to be on the football field. So Drake, get back out there on the football field. So if you missed it, we've already talked about Monday Night Football. We talked about the trade deadline and the couple of moves that were made this morning. We'll continue to follow that here on the show. If anything pops before the end of the show, we'll obviously follow it over at fantasyguru.com. Articles, we'll talk about it in the Discord, which you have access to if you sign up for any of the products. Click that subscribe tab in the top right corner of the site. Jeff Mans will be talking about the movement on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio show from 3 to 6 Eastern. That's the Elite Sports Show. But it's a Tuesday. And on Tuesdays, we talk to our man, Armando Marsal. You can find Armando doing live streams at fantasyguru.com. You can go to the website, click the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page. You can find this show. You can find One Man's Opinion from Jeff Mans. You can find Mind of Marsal from Armando. You can find all his articles coming up the next couple of days. And you can find him here every Tuesday at about 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, talking some football with us. So let's bring in Armando live from Florida. Armando, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good, Ray. Excited to be on here talking football as I am every Tuesday. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, we had some movement this morning too, and this is interesting. We've seen some trades already in the NFL. It's kind of been a hotter year than normal. Normally we get these guys traded and, it's some backup safety or something. That's some real movement here. And I think this morning, Mingo to the Cowboys. What about the Herbert one to the Bengals before we dive into the waiver wire? Sounds like Zach Moss could miss substantial time, which means Khalil Herbert could pretty quickly become the number 2 running back for a team that just gave the ball 30 times to their number 1 running back.
Yeah, so I think that this move signifies that Moss is going to be out for an extended amount of time, right? He's dealing with that neck injury there. So I do think that this moves, that's exactly what this means. I now think Herbert becomes the backup to Brown. I do think that Brown did good. I think he kind of was leaning in that direction already, right? We saw like the usage kind of switch from Moss to Brown there. Moss was still getting anywhere between 7 and 9 opportunities per game here in his last 3 games. So I think Herbert can step into that kind of role, right? Where there's going to be weeks where he gets, 6 to 7 opportunities, some weeks where he gets 9 to 10 opportunities, right? It really depends on game script. But I do think if he's out there right now, you want to add him, especially if you're a Chase Brown owner. I think this becomes the handcuff for Chase Brown. So some of that if he's out there, I think you can get relatively cheap. I don't think you have to go and break the bank. I don't think everyone's running out to get him, but I do think he makes a lot of sense, especially even if you don't have Brown. I do think he's someone you can add, stash. We've seen how this backfield is using their running backs already, right? So if Brown goes down or if Brown misses time, Herbert can now step into that Brown role that we're seeing. That was, you said an abundance of opportunities this weekend. So, I do think this is a valuable backfield to be invested in.
And by the way, folks, we have 2 Herberts in the NFL that we need to talk about now. So use that first name. The other Herbert, Justin, we're starting to see some things here. We're starting to throw the ball a little bit more, starting to throw for 2 touchdowns, starting to throw for 270 yards. Like, people starting to remember, I think, that Justin Herbert's pretty damn good. Justin Herbert could still be on waiver wires, though. And so I think the real question is not, do we super flex play him? Not, do we 2 QB start him? Of course we do that. The question is he a QB1 for you? Is he somebody that you're adding with that expectation at this point? Is he just another, Kirk Cousins and, he's quarterback 10 to 14 and whatever? Your thoughts on Justin Herbert?
Yeah, so for me, it really depends on your quarterback situation, right? He has finished as a top 10 quarterback in back-to weeks. Something we've seen now, he's thrown the ball at least 27 times in 5 straight games, over 30 times in 3 of those games. He now has back-to-back games of 270 plus passing yards and multiple touchdowns. So, and the week before that, he didn't throw any touchdowns, but he threw for over 300 passing yards. So, we're starting to see kind of the passing game evolve more there in Los Angeles. This is still a run-first team, but we're seeing Herbert more comfortable with his weapons. Remember, this is an entirely new offense that we saw. We got McConkey there. We got just Quentin Johnston entering that second year there. So it's an evolving full of young players, and we're kind of seeing it click now, right? It takes some time for some of these offenses to finally start clicking, and we're seeing that now. As far as in a single quarterback league, I really do think it depends on your situation, right? If you have Dak Prescott and I heard you say they place him on IR, things change quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and get Herbert if he's out there. I would be comfortable with Herbert. I'm totally fine with that. But it also depends on who's out there. But yeah, I do think that he's someone, given how he's playing, given some of the matchups that he has in the upcoming weeks, I do think he's somebody you can consider as a top 12 quarterback. And so if you're hurting at the quarterback position, or if you've been, just kind of streaming the position, he's somebody you can plug and play and, safely feel comfortable moving forward with.
All right. So he's trending up. Quentin Johnston has to be trending up too, 100 yards and a touchdown. Now, for those people that didn't see the game, Quentin Johnston wasn't covered. Cornerback let him go. The safety help was supposed to come over. It didn't come over. Herbert dropped the ball into him. He was open by 25 feet, and he just ran. So 66 of the 108 yards or whatever the hell it was, any receiver in the NFL could have done. It wasn't. So where are we at with him? Again, if this offense is trending forward and Ladd McConkey's really the only guy, I guess Will Dissly a little bit too, but, Ladd McConkey's the only wide receiver on this team that's catching 5 passes a week. Is Quentin Johnston worth, a couple of shekels, as Justin Fensterman would say? What are your thoughts here? Because there's talent, but still.
You're getting a boom or bust receiver, right? You mentioned, I wrote it in the recap article. I have it here. I'm okay. For what it's worth, Johnson scored on a busted coverage. That's what it was. It was a busted coverage, but there's no denying it. We saw that. But it's been up or down with him, right? And I think that if you're starting him, you're doing that with that understanding where it's a hit or miss. He's not going to give you that consistent production. I think the one that has become an every week starter for the Chargers is McConkey. I think his his floor is the safest. He's their go-to guy. He's their number one guy. So he would be the one that I'd feel comfortable starting. Johnston, yeah, he's a good depth piece. He's someone that you can have there, as an emergency plug and play because he is getting, opportunities. The problem is the production is very volatile. And if you're okay with that kind of receiver on your roster or okay with starting that kind of receiver, sure. But you just have to be understanding what you're investing in, right? Like when you're looking at the target share here for Johnston, you got 19%, and this is by game, okay? 19%, 13%, 19%, 10%, 30%, 20%. That 20 and 30% was the first 2 weeks of the season. Since then, it's been all McConkey, right? Yeah. Like since he's gotten going, it's been all McConkey. So very volatile production, very volatile usage there for Johnston. And just keep that in mind when you're investing in him.
Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com joining us here as he does every Tuesday. Jauan Jennings, it's been a while. He's missed some time. There was a bye week involved. People making all kinds of moves because he's not in the news anymore. Deebo Samuel should play and see a full complement of snaps. At least that's our expectation at this point. But Brandon Ayuk was gone, right? And Deebo's always beat up. Jauan Jennings, a priority add over Johnston if you had to choose between the two, and kind of what are you thinking? Is Jennings somebody that could be a wide receiver 3 down the stretch?
So we talked about this last week. I also talked about it on Tuesday with Russell and Tyler, and I think he is the forgotten man. And I think that if he's out there, you're going to get him very cheap, and I think it could pay a lot of dividends. In my opinion, if he's out there, obviously depending on who else is out there, but yes, over Johnston, I'm prioritizing Jennings over Johnston. I'm prioritizing Jennings over a lot of receivers that are currently out there on waivers. I think he can step into a solidified role. I mean, we saw it earlier this season. He had that monster game, and yes, we're not expecting that kind of production, but the point of that is he had a really solidified role in that game, and he also had a solidified role the following week. Once they got fully healthy, kind of fizzled out, but now they're not fully healthy. You mentioned the Deebo's still dinged up, even if he plays or not, he's still dinged up. Someone that could easily re-aggravate the injury. We've seen it in years past. Ayuk out for the season. There's the emergence of Pearsall, but I think Jennings, they kept him around here for a reason. He knows this offense, he knows this system. I think that they can count on him. Purdy has that trust in him, and I think that goes a long way. So I do expect Jennings to carve out a solidified role. And like you mentioned, maybe not a consistent wide receiver 3, but I do think you got a consistent flex play here moving forward with wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 2 upside on some weeks.
Monomer Solid FG. What about the situation in Carolina? I talked about this earlier. Obviously, Deontay Johnson was traded last week to the Ravens. Earlier today, Jonathan Mingo traded to the Cowboys. We're down to Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, and Adam Thielen. There's a lot of reports, rumors. Adam Thielen could be traded too. Where are we at with Xavier Legette? Because, he scored a touchdown in 2 straight games. He's obviously, with each passing minute, moving up the pecking order because guys are on the way out. He did hurt his wrist last week, and for those people that missed it, there was an interception given to Bryce Young that was completely Xavier Legette's fault. He caught the ball, and as he came down, the defender literally ripped the ball right out of his hand, so it went for a pick, so it wasn't Bryce Young's fault. But he's at worst the wide receiver 2 on this team, with the chance to be the wide receiver 1 if Thielen is dealt. Where are we at with Xavier Legette at the moment?
Yeah, so he's had 13 targets in the last 2 games. I think you could see anywhere between 5 and 7 targets here on a week-to-week basis. So is the production going to be consistent? No, I don't think it is. I just think that the opportunities are going to be there. I like him as a depth piece, not someone I want to rely on each and every week. But yeah, I do think adding him makes a lot of sense if he's out there. I wouldn't go crazy and overbid. We just talked about Jennings. I would prioritize Jennings over Legette as well here this week. But I do think that just by default, he is going to step into, I think, 5-6 opportunities every week, or 5-6 targets. I think it's just very feasible, and there's going to be potential for more. Like you mentioned, Thielen gets dealt. There's going to be potential for more there. You can end up being the number 1 wide receiver on this team, just by default. So, I think he's a good addition. I just wouldn't go overbidding on him.
Armando, let's talk about the Cowboys. They're 3-5. I said it earlier. Their season's circling the drain. They just lost Dak Prescott. Jerry Jones, the owner, said that he's going to the IR, so he's going to be out 4 weeks with the hamstring injury. The arm, shoulder, I guess it is, with CeeDee Lamb's beat up. I don't know what the hell's going on with Ezekiel Elliott. I guess he's just not showing up for work, so he was inactive last week. Lots of changes here, lots of things going wrong. Rico Dowdle, everyone has wanted him to become a thing. And last week he was a thing, finally. Are we going to see more of what we saw last week in terms of his production? Because if he's still on the waiver wire, people are going to be excited about him. And if he's not on the waiver wire, everyone's going to want to start him this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's had at least 18 opportunities in 2 of his last 3 games. And we're also seeing him involved in the passing game, at least 6 targets in the last 2 games. So I think because of that, you want to add him to your roster. Whether you're starting him or not, whether you're going to depend on him or not, you want to start, you want to add a player that's getting this kind of usage to your roster because it could be this, the thing moving forward. This is a team like, I don't know if you saw the clip, and I don't know how accurate it is, but there was a clip of Dak Prescott saying, "We effing suck," like out there. I'm like, oh my. So I feel like this, like you said, Dallas is just kind of going down that downward spiral here, and I don't think there's any turning back for this team. But I still think he's going to get the opportunities. I think he's going to get usage, and if he's getting 15 to 16 opportunities per week, he could become a flex play for you or an emergency plug and play if you need help at the running back position. I don't think this kind of usage, though, should be on waivers. The pair with this kind of usage, I don't think he should be out there. So if he is out there, I would go and get him. As far as how much you invest or how much you're prioritizing him, it really is depending on your roster.
Circling back to the same idea with Jauan Jennings, Tajae Spears is out there in a lot of waiver wires. He's been dealing with the hamstring injury. He hasn't played. Missed again this week. The team came out after giving Pollard 47 touches this week. I'm always slightly exaggerating. They came out and said, we can't keep doing this. Duh. Like, Pollard has not shown an ability to take a full season workload, and they've X'd that the last couple of games here. Pollard's touching it 23, 24, 27, 30 times. Is Tajae Spears throw a dollar ad off the waiver wire kind of guy? Like, I know if you have Pollard, you should have Spears, but if you're one of these people, and it seems like everyone is, that's playing the Russian roulette with the running backs, Spears an interesting guy who's basically going to be free or if not super cheap to pick up?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problems with adding a player like Tajae Spears and having him on the bench. Like, I really don't. I think these are the kind of running backs and the kind of players really, that you want as depth pieces down the stretch. Like you mentioned it, Pollard, he's not used to this kind of usage, right? He's not that big of a running back. You have to have some concerns there, right? Of durability issues. And if Spears returns once he's healthy, we know he can handle the workload. We've kind of seen it. We've seen his role. And I do think he's going to work as a change of pace back and just a complementary back to Pollard at some point in the season. So just having that luxury, getting him now when you can get him at either $0 or $1 or $2, whatever the case may be, versus $50 down the stretch. Like, once he becomes active, has a good game, and everyone else is like, well, now let's go get him. I think you want to be proactive with someone like Spears. And if you have him, I'm still holding. If you have obviously, if you have the ability to hold him, I continue to hold someone like Spears here.
His teammate Nick Westbrook-Akine is someone who we talked about on the show, and we said it was last week, like, look, there are worse options. Not a good option, but there's worse options because he's on the field all the time. Well, he scored again last week. I think that's 4 straight weeks. Had his best game, too. He had 5 catches and all that. So he absolutely is trending upward. The obvious concern with Nick Westbrook-Akine is he has 1 game this year with 3 catches. He's had an opportunity for years and never emerged as anything more than a depth guy. It seems like Will Levis was going to go back under center if he's healthy, which could be this week. So what do we do with NWI? Because someone's going to pay for a guy that they just realized has got 4 touchdowns and coming off his game last week. Should it be the people watching the show?
No, I wouldn't overpay here. So it's funny because I'm in a 14-team PPR league with a couple of flex spots, and he was an emergency start for me this week. And I added him for $0. Okay, he was an emergency start. Was I comfortable about it? Not so comfortable. I know we were touchdown chasing, and I think that's what you're going to do with someone like NWI, right? You're chasing touchdowns here because he's had 6 targets. Like, 6 targets is the most he's had any game this season, right? Like, it's just that's a season high for him. I would bid a couple of dollars if you're really hurting at the position and you're in a deep league, 14, 16 team league. Like in a 10-team PPR, you don't have to be investing in NWI. Even in some 12 teams, like, he's probably not going to make your starting lineup. You have to be in a really bad position, where you've been dealing with injuries and you also had London and you may have had Olave. Like, again, like, if you're dealing with multiple injuries and you have no one else to go to, yes. But if you're set at receiver, you just have to understand, like, do you want to invest in someone that you're probably never going to play, right? Outside of complete emergency or a complete disaster situation. So that's how I would view him. I don't think he's a priority by any means.
Going to the Saints, that's how I've always viewed Taysom Hill. Like I mean, right? It's like,
oh my God, that's so frustrating.
I know, but we got to talk about him because we got to talk about two things. One, him, and then the backfield of the Saints. Alvin Kamara had 35 touches last week, which we can talk all about Pollard not being able to handle the workload. But Alvin Kamara is going to break into 13 pieces if they keep doing this. Like there's no chance. There's no chance. He just can't, right? At this stage of his career, this background and everything like that. Jameson, Jamal Williams is dealing with injury. He can't get healthy. Kendry Miller's dealing with injury. He's on the IR. The only back they have is Jordan Mims. So we even suggested to a lot of people play Taysom Hill last week because it's like,
yeah.
And he went out and did it. He got in the end zone. Okay. Are we still in that same spot with Taysom Hill, number one? And number two, if we are hunting for that backup, is it Jamal Williams? Is it Jordan Mims? Like, what are we doing? Because Kamara's wheels could blow off this weekend.
Yeah, so I think Hill's going to be the one that benefits the most in those situations, right? Like, you can go with Mims, you could go with Williams, but I don't think any one of those backs is going to step into that Kamara role. I really do think it becomes a very messy situation where they're going to lean on Williams, they'll lean on Mims, and then when they get down to the red zone, it's going to be Hill time. Like, and I think when you look at Hill, I think he's going to continue to be very touchdown dependent. I think obviously he presents a lot of upside. Like this weekend, he's averaged 1.6 fantasy point per opportunity. We've seen him average over a fantasy point per opportunity numerous times throughout the season and throughout his career, really. So it's a matter of, does he get into those touchdowns? Like, does he get you those touchdowns? And I think if Kamara is out at any moment, I think Hill's going to be that primary guy that they utilize in the red zone. And he could be utilized so many ways, as a pass catcher, as a thrower, as a runner. So I think he becomes that valuable. Correct. I think he becomes that valuable piece for them there. I wouldn't want to go, like someone asked me today, oh, should I be adding Williams or Mims? I'm like,
right.
And then dropping other players. Like, no, I'm not cutting Ray Davis for Williams or Mims. I'm not cutting a player like Braylon Allen for Williams or Mims. Like, I prefer those kind of players right now. I feel like those are more solidified roles if the starter were to go down than Williams or Mims.
Oh boy, Saints.
Yeah, it's messy. It's really messy.
91 points and going 2-0, and they've lost every game since.
Right? It's so bad. Like the wheels fell off quick.
Just amazing. Mike Gesicki. Jeff Mans went pretty angry with Mike Gesicki yesterday. Mike Gesicki ended up being the guy that all the trains used in DFS this week at the tight end, and it paid off. And Jeff talked about the fact, which is correct, that there were literally four tight ends for the Bengals that were getting snaps and running routes and everything like that. So Eric all got hurt. Gesicki did his thing. Right or wrong, Gesicki has produced this season when T. Higgins has been out. T. Higgins was out again last week. The early reports are that theoretically he didn't practice yesterday with the quad injury, so no one knows what So the question with Mike Gesicki is he a tight end one the rest of the way? Or is he a tight end 2/streaming option? And in what scenarios would you play him regardless?
Higgins would have to be out for me to comfortably play him. And I wrote this, I believe it was the recap article as well, that he doesn't give us a safe floor. Like, Gesicki does not give us a safe floor outside of when Higgins is out. In games that Higgins has been out, he's been targeted 27 times. That's 4 games. He's targeted 27 times. In those games, he's finished as a top 12 tight end 3 times, right? So that's the only time I'm going to feel comfortable with Gesicki. If you're investing in Gesicki now, it's with the intention of starting him if Higgins is out. If Higgins does not play, I'm going to give you some results. 11, 52, 29, 45, 50. That's where he's finished among tight ends in PPR scoring. Okay, those are really bad numbers. Like, he's given us
50 is not good. Yeah, that's not.
Listen, 8.7 PPR points, 0.1, 5.1, 0, 1.2. Those are games with T. Higgins in. So you're talking about a massive difference in role production. And Jeff is not wrong. A lot of the tight ends, I believe they had 2 top 10 tight ends this weekend in production. If I'm not mistaken, I would have to fact check that. But I believe that they had 2 top 10, if not 2 top 12 in production this week. So, yeah, Gesicki had the big game, right? But at the end of the day, like, if Higgins is out, if Higgins is in, you're seeing those numbers. Like, they're very, very different. So for me, yes, he's someone you play comfortably with Higgins out. If he's not out, I cannot feel comfortable about Gesicki. It's just too much variance for me.
I'm looking at a scoring system in my dynasty league. They're all a little different, but sample was 11. So to your point, there you go. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right in that spot. So and remember, quarterbacks don't often throw for 5 touchdowns either. I know Burrow's done it a couple times, but generally they don't throw for 5 touchdowns. Yeah. He's Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com. Let's go to the Discord chat, or the chat room. It's not Discord. Sorry. Let's go to the chat room here. I get so used to saying Discord. We were just talking about the scenario, and Robert's got a question. Robert says, realistically, how long will Kamara hold up? And with no viable handcuff, would it be a bad idea to trade him right now?
I mean, again, trade him.
What are we looking for? A huge return, or are we selling him away as he's running back 15?
You can get I think you get a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. I think you get a wide receiver 1. It really depends on what the team that needs the running back has, right? You could maybe package an RB2 and a wide receiver 2, and get yourself, instead of one player, you can get 2 good players. Your roster really matters as well. But I have nothing against selling someone like Kamara. I think you could sell him at a high price right now. A reasonably high, right? I don't think you're going to get a top tier player, but I think you could get very good returns for Kamara, and I have nothing against trading him. I'm not selling low. I'm not going to panic trade and say, well, he's going to break down, so I have to trade him. I'm not going to sell low like that. But I think if you could improve your roster, it's the way I see it. If you can improve your roster and trade by trading away Kamara, I have nothing against doing so.
Henry V says, huge day for America, which is it. It is, as I said at the start. Everyone go out and vote. And then he says, who will America choose at the top waiver wire target? And his guess is Taysom Hill.
Oh, no. It really depends right on the league. It depends on where you're at and who's out there. I think you can make a case for several players. I don't think America's going to choose Hill like that.
I hope not. Let's make good decisions today, folks.
Yes, please.
John G says he's got Purdy as a quarterback. He knows that I'm not a fan of holding 2 quarterbacks in non-PPR and non-Superflex leagues. I know you're pretty much the same way, right? Ideally, you hold 1 quarterback. He's got Purdy. Does John drop Stroud?
At this point, yeah. I mean, Purdy had this bye. He's coming off his bye. I think you're comfortably starting Purdy each and every week. I don't see any trade value in Stroud in this single quarterback league right now, especially he's been very, very inconsistent. So at this point, I rather hold a running or this is a non-PPR, so I'm probably looking at or is it a non-PPR?
This is non-super flex.
Oh, okay. So I'd be looking at running back or wide receiver depth here instead of that second quarterback. If in a standard league, I'd be more inclined for running back depth. In a PPR or half PPR, either or, whatever position.
You froze up there, Armando. Hopefully we'll get you back in a second.
It has best availability there.
There you go. Okay.
Am I back?
You just froze for a second. You're back now. You're back. Let's use this for a teachable moment for a second. If you have Stroud and Purdy, in my opinion, in a 1 quarterback league, that was a mistake. Both these guys were being drafted as QB1s. In some drafts, top 10, top 8. You spent a lot, you made a trade or whatever it was, right? And you waited so long through the process that now you're talking about turning CJ Stroud, who was a 5th round pick, into Tajae Spears. That's just so, this is why we talk about, always looking at the roster, having depth charts, having a plan in place. I've seen this with a lot of people recently, Armando, who have TJ Hawkinson. I've got Hawkinson and Kelce. I've got Hawkinson and Laporta. I've got Hawkinson and Kincaid. What do I do? And I'm like, you got to trade one of them. Now the problem is some people don't have that choice. I got to make a move right now. So I see people, which of these 2 do I drop? We have to manage our roster in a very precise way. And I think a lot of people are trying to hit the home run. Well, if Hawkinson is a number 2 tight end, and if Laporta is number 3, and if Stroud and Purdy are both top 5, but is that the right way to build a roster?
No, and I'm so glad you brought this up because I got asked something very similar today, regarding I have Laporta and Hawkinson. My initial thought is, why do we have both? Because look, we could be result oriented right now in week 9 or heading into week 10 and say, well, Laporta hasn't had that year that everyone expected. But you're on draft day that you drafted him in top 3 round, top 4 round in a lot of these drafts.
Yep.
So you used a top 4 round pick on a position that you only start 1, and we recommend one, and then you probably use a 9th or 10th round pick on a second player of that position when at that moment Brian Robinson was out there in a lot of leagues. Chase Brown was out there. Like now you're looking like what you cannot trade Hawkinson or Laporta right now for neither of those players. Like you cannot get those players, right? So the same thing is the quarterback. Like once you invest in that quarterback, and I always say I try to leave every draft with a top 12 quarterback, like from my rankings. If I do that and I execute that plan accordingly, guess what? I don't have to worry about the position until the bye week. That's how I view it. That's how I'm treating it. Same thing goes for tight end. If I am investing in early draft capital on a tight end, I'm doing it with only one. And I don't worry about, if Hawkinson becomes that guy that we thought he could be, or that elite tight end that he was before the injury. Okay, great. You know what? Someone else will have that. I'm not going to be in that decision making each and every week. Am I starting Laporta? Am I starting Hawkinson? If you're doing this, then you have to think as Hawkinson as a flex player, and you have to be comfortable flexing a tight end. I'm not in the business of flexing tight ends outside of tight end premium leagues. I just don't like to do that, So I would always advise is 1 and 1. Like don't draft multiple players at those positions, especially when you're investing early draft capital. Like you're in a position now where you're going to have to cut one of these players, right? Because you're probably not going to get any trade for Stroud. And then when it comes to Laporta or Hawkinson, you're going to have to sell Laporta at lower than your initial investment. Like you're not going to get a first or a top 5 round capital or a draft, a player caliber in return. So yeah, I'm going to write an article about this next season because I see a lot of people like still doing this, and I want to kind of like put it all on paper, let someone read it and show numbers as to why, this could be a mistake. So it is I have it on my list in my little notebook right here. I have right here.
Nice.
Right here.
Oh, there it is.
It's in
there. Little. You weren't kidding.
Yeah, it's a little one. Yeah. So I have it there. That's an article I want to write next year. I think it's a very good draft strategy article idea.
Now, in this example that we were talking about, like John G, maybe someone dropped Stroud and he just picked him up. I mean, maybe it was like, someone dropped him and I'm going to pick him up and hope he has a couple of big weeks and trade him, and it didn't work out. I get it. And so it's always that balancing act, right? It's like if Hawkinson is sitting on the waiver wire, he shouldn't be on the waiver wire. If Stroud's on the waiver wire, he shouldn't be on the waiver wire. But does it fit your team to do it? And another thing that I've noticed with Hawkinson in particular, and we'll see it with Pacheco here coming up too, is that, let's say you have Laporta and Hawkinson in our example. Let's say you want Hawkinson. Like your belief is Hawkins is going to be the guy in the second half. That's fine. You then have to be comfortable with Laporta just being dropped because you're not going to get anything in a trade for Sam Laporta, right? Conversely, if you're a Laporta guy and you just picked up Hawkinson as a trade piece, as he's coming off the injured list, did you plan to hold two tight ends? Because what then Hawkinson goes out and he plays half the snaps and catches 3 balls. He's not doing anything. So it's just weird to me. Someone asked me this morning about dropping Jonathan Brooks. I'm like, you've held Jonathan Brooks all season long, and you're going to drop him the week he's activated? Like, correct. People oddly use the IR, and like they then try to react immediately when the player's brought off the IR, and it's almost too late because then you got a couple of days to try to figure this out. If you can't figure it out, you just wasted the IR spot for however long you had a guy on it.
100%. Like you have to plan. Like when you make these moves, like if I draft someone that's going to be on IR, my intention is to keep that player until he comes off IR, evaluate the situation once he's off IR, and then decide whether I'm going to use him or not in my starting lineup. Like that's how my approach is when it comes to players on IR. Like if I drafted Hawkinson, this is what I would have done. I would have drafted Hawkinson if I had an IR spot. And then I would have just exhausted a late round pick on it and streamed it to the position. I'm not going to invest early draft capital. Like that would have been my draft plan, right? Like go and someone like let's say a Tyler Conklin, a Gesicki, where I thought was a late round flyer. Like I would take shots on late round guys like that, like super late, where I'm not using any other draft capital early on in my drafts on the position. That would be the only way I would draft Hawkinson. If I took a top, 10, top 7 tight end, I'm not drafting Hawkins, So, and if you're utilizing the IR, like I saw the same question, I answered it as well. Why? There's no need. Like Brooks is coming off now. Like, why are we going to cut? Like, you're going to put him out there now, and guess what? In a week or two, you're going to be bidding for that same player if he's still available. Like, I'm pretty sure you drop him, and everyone else is going to go after him. Like, that's how this works. So, this was I recommended Downs in that one. I don't know what you recommended, but I recommended Downs. It was like the 6th receiver, I think, or 5th receiver on that roster. Downs really not going to make that starting lineup given the receivers that team had. So, but yeah, I agree with you, Ray.
Eric, final question. We're just talking about Brooks. He says, speaking of Brooks, I need to activate him. I need to drop somebody. Now, again, our assumption at this point is that Brooks will be activated. Dave Canellis has never said definitively it's going to happen. He's left open the possibility that Brooks won't play this year. I don't think that's the case. I think he will be activated and play. But Eric's got a question here. Spillane as a linebacker, because obviously it's an IDP league, or Pearsall. We can't really speak to the IDP part. We don't know who's on your roster. We don't know what your ID. Like my IDP league, we start 11 guys. You might start 3. And so we can't really speak to that part. So let's talk about Brooks for Pearsall. And again, we don't know the team, but would you drop Pearsall or Brooks if you had to make that choice? And again, I'm putting you on the hot seat without an answer because we don't know the roster, but what do you think of the relative value as a Pearsall and Brooks the rest of the way?
I would be cutting Pearsall. I mean, because we don't know what Brooks is going to be yet, but we know what he can or what we know what the expectation is, right? We understand what the expectation is as him potentially being that high-end RB for the Carolina Panthers. Is it going to come to fruition this year? We don't know that. We don't know if they're going to put him out there and get 20 opportunities per week on a team that really, what are we playing for, right? Like, so maybe they'll just ease him in. Maybe they use some type of committee this year, get him in the flow of the game, let him understand the system. But maybe they turn the keys over and say, you know what, let's see what we got here and let's let him run wild. We don't know what the Carolina Panthers coaching staff is going to do. At this point, I'm just going to hold and see. Since I've held him this long, I'm going to wait, see it through, right? I want to see it through and kind of see what happens and what his role becomes. I'm not saying you have to start him this week. I'm not saying you have to start him next week, but kind of see it through and see what happens.
Armando Marsal at fantasyguru.com. Join us every Tuesday. We take questions like we're doing today. I appreciate everybody for jumping in today with their thoughts and comments and everything like that. And we'll go out and get your vote in. Place your vote. Get your little sticker. Yay! Yeah, do all that. Armando, around the voting, we're going to be doing obviously football stuff over at fantasyguru.com. It's Tuesday. You'll be on the live stream tonight at 7:00 Eastern, I expect. Correct?
Yes, there. I might be on tonight. Waiting on Rich, but yeah, I might be on tonight. But yeah, we got the Tuesday the roster coach live stream. We have tomorrow the snap and usage breakdown. Then we got staff picks coming out on Thursday, as well as the red zone review, the defense versus position charts there. Friday we got the DFS breakdown. Friday night, Tyler Beaker, the live stream. That's a great live stream every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern. He usually has a guest on. They talk to DFS late. Then on Sunday, Chris Rose and myself at 11 a.m. Eastern. This week, it's actually going to be Tyler and I because Chris will be at the Jaguars-Vikings game. So he'll be watching some football this weekend there. So Tyler Beaker will join me 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. And as usual, we're in Discord from 11:30 all the way up to lock every Sunday, answering all and as many questions as we can there. It is a lot of questions. So but we do try to get to all of them. It is a fun time and right up at the lock. So yeah, lots of content, lots of stuff. Oh, and I do want to say this is not football related, but I do want to point this out. If you are NBA fans or if you haven't checked out our NBA, we have some really cool projections coming out. They're going to go live very soon, actually. There's no games today, so you won't be able to see it today, but I've already seen the back end stuff. Rusty has been kind of sharing that with me. Really cool. A lot of cool stats, tools that you can use there. There's going to be minute projections. We're going to try to get the usage projections. There's going to be notes, status updates, all of that stuff, point projections. Check that out. It's part of the NBA DFS package. So it's a really, really cool feature that we're going to have now. Also going to be able to have some cheat sheets because of that. So if you haven't checked it out, check out the NBA DFS package.
You can always go to fantasyguru.com, click the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page to find this show and Armando's show, mine and Marsal. You can also go to the website at the top right corner, click subscribe. You want the MVP package. That's what Armando's talking about. If you sign up for the MVP package, I'm going to read it off here. You get NBA, college basketball, NHL, MMA, PGA, soccer, horse racing, NASCAR. It's all one package. It's the MVP plan. So if you want to get any of those sports, NBA, NHL, MMA, PGA, soccer, horse racing, or NASCAR, sign up for the MVP package. You can get Armando's work. You can get Justin Fensterman's work, the crew's work on basketball. We're seeing screenshots all the time. People sharing winning $500, $1,000. Mark Hogan's won $50,000 multiple times with DFS Marlin, one of our guys. So the DFS crew is rocking and rolling right now. So sign up for that product, subscribe, top right corner, get the MVP plan if you want to find Armando's work. How much work are you doing on basketball right now? Are you doing much, if any, right now? I know you will be heavily when football ends?
So I'm going to be doing primarily cheat sheets right now. I'm going to toss in an article every now and then, but I'll be doing a lot of cheat sheets right now. I'm in Discord. I'll be posting bets as well for basketball. And but once this football season starts dwindling down, then that's when I'm going to be like full hands on deck on articles. Probably be doing like a couple of articles a week there as well. And then I will be joining Fensty on his podcast very soon as well to talk some NBA.
Yeah, his podcast, Elite Plus, top of the page. You get them all the shows. The Elite
the
Plus
Basketball
Network.
Diaries, baby. Great pod.
There you go. Yeah, and Justin will be on the show tomorrow because he's on every Wednesday, by the way. Armando's on every Tuesday joining me. Thanks for the time today, Armando. Really appreciate it. As always, enjoy the rest of your day. Let's see if we get some big trades in football and have a lot more to talk about this afternoon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me on.
You got it. He is Armando Marsal. I am Ray Flowers. Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com. We'll return tomorrow at 12 o'clock Eastern with Justin Fensterman and Rich Mileto. Have a great day. Get out and vote. Let's have some success in Week 10. For Armando, I'm Ray. We're out. Peace.